The day the Arousing ship entered Earth's orbit, the sky over the Pacific turned silver for a few seconds. Commander Ethan Cole stood on the command platform of the orbital station and stared at the glowing silhouette. Every human on the bridge went silent. They had seen alien ships before, but this one looked alive. Its surface moved like liquid glass, its hull breathing with faint pulses of blue light. When the ship docked, Ethan adjusted his collar and waited near the airlock. The air shimmered and she appeared, Lyra of the Arousing Dominion, the envoy of a civilization 10,000 years ahead of Earth. Her body seemed weightless, her skin faintly luminous, her eyes like molten gold. She looked at the human officer as if she were studying an unknown life form. He greeted her with a polite nod. "Welcome aboard, Envoy Lyra." His voice was steady, plain, very human. She tilted her head. To her, his words sounded blunt, almost crude. Arousings communicated through layered tones and harmonic pulses. Human speech seemed broken, primitive. Yet something about its rawness stirred her curiosity. The human crew led her through the corridors. The station smelled of metal, oil, and faint coffee. Strange scents that reminded Lyra of old archives describing her species' early centuries, before perfection. She watched how humans touched walls, spoke loudly, laughed without control. Their emotions were unfiltered. They were not afraid to look imperfect. Ethan escorted her to the command center. He explained how the station managed traffic and defense systems. While he spoke, Lyra's attention wandered to his hands, rough, marked with faint scars. He used them to point, to gesture, to emphasize every thought. No Arousing ever needed to move so much. They controlled tools with neural commands. Humans still relied on muscle, contact, and instinct. It seemed inefficient, even reckless, yet strangely powerful. During the technical exchange, one of the plasma conduits sparked. The light dimmed. Arousing technicians reached for control panels, but the system froze. Lyra was ready to call her AI assistant when Ethan stepped forward without hesitation. He pulled open the panel, ignoring the heat. "It's a grounding fault," he muttered, and used a simple metal tool to adjust a connector. Sparks burst and the light returned. Lyra blinked. "You risked exposure," she said. He smiled faintly. "It's faster to fix things when you can feel them." The idea confused her. In the Dominion, touch was for machines, not for leaders. To see a commander use his hands felt backward. Yet as she looked at the human bending over the glowing wires, sweat on his forehead, determination in his eyes, she felt something deep inside, and not fear. Not admiration, but a pull she couldn't name. Later, when they toured the observation deck, Lyra asked questions about human wars and inventions. Ethan answered with quiet honesty, never hiding their failures. "We learn the hard way," he said. "That's the only way we grow." His words carried a kind of pride that didn't fit the Arousing mind. Her people erased mistakes. Humans wore them like armor. Outside the wide window, Earth turned slowly below them, blue, alive, untamed. Lyra pressed her hand against the glass. "Your world is chaotic," she whispered. He looked at her reflection. "That's what keeps it real." She turned to him, trying to understand why these short-lived beings refused perfection. They built things that broke, loved people who hurt them, explored places that could kill them. Yet they smiled through it all. To Lyra, it was irrational. To Ethan, it was the only way to live. That evening, the delegation dined in the main hall. Humans offered cooked food, vegetables and grilled fish. The Arousings ate through nutrient streams that delivered balanced energy. Lyra hesitated, then tried a small piece from the plate in front of her. The flavor exploded on her tongue, wild, uneven, full of life. Her neural implants struggled to classify it. She looked across the table. Ethan was watching her, amused by her reaction. She pretended not to notice, but her pulse quickened slightly. When the meeting ended, she stood alone near the viewport, watching Earth's lights flicker through the clouds. Ethan joined her quietly. "Tomorrow we start joint tests with your ship," he said. She nodded. "I look forward to observing your methods," he chuckled. "You'll find them a bit primitive." His tone was teasing, but not arrogant. Lyra studied him again. His expression carried warmth, something she rarely saw in her kind. "Primitive," she repeated softly, almost tasting the word. "Perhaps that is why it feels different." As he left, Lyra touched the edge of the window where his reflection had been. For the first time, she wondered if the Arousings, in chasing perfection, had lost something invisible but essential. The human way, Raw, uncertain, passionate, might not be as backward as she once believed. That night, in her quiet quarters, she replayed the memory of his hands fixing the broken conduit. The image stayed in her mind longer than she expected. The next morning began with the soft hum of engines across the orbital station. Ethan stood on the main deck, waiting for the Arousing ship to connect with the human docking bay for the joint test mission. The crew moved with quiet focus, while the alien vessel glowed faintly, its skin shifting colors like liquid crystal. Lyra appeared at the airlock again, calm as always, her golden eyes taking in every detail. She walked beside Ethan as they entered the command room. "Your technology looks handcrafted," she said with curiosity. He smiled a little. "That's because it is. We don't let machines do all the work. We build what we use." Her lips curved faintly. "That seems slow." "Maybe," he said, "but it makes us care about what we make." Her expression softened, though she didn't fully understand his meaning. The Aurivians had long given up the idea of personal creation. Their machines built everything precise and emotionless. But as she watched the humans operate, she noticed how they worked together. Gestures, eye contact, simple words. They moved like a single organism, connected not by code but by trust. When the joint test began, the humans and Aurivians exchanged control of the vessel's systems. Lyra demonstrated the Dominion's advanced neural interface. She stood in the center of the bridge, eyes closed, and threads of light flowed from her headpiece into the ship's core. The engines responded instantly, humming in perfect sync. Ethan watched in silent awe. "Impressive," he said quietly. Lyra opened her eyes. "Efficiency and precision are essential. Our systems respond to thought alone." He nodded. "Let's see if your ship likes human hands too." When it was his turn, the difference was obvious. Humans didn't connect by neural links. They used manual switches, gestures, voice commands. The ship hesitated, unaccustomed to such crude control. The Aurivian crew looked uneasy. Lyra folded her arms, trying not to smile. Ethan pressed a few keys, adjusted the throttle, and the ship jerked forward suddenly. An alarm beeped. He winced, muttered something under his breath, and began working again, slower this time. After a minute, the ship stabilized. "See?" he said, glancing at her. "Not perfect, but it moves." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "Your movements are random," he laughed. "Not random, adaptive." Before she could respond, the lights flickered again. A magnetic fluctuation rippled through the control grid. The Aurivian systems began to overheat. Lyra's technicians panicked and reached for neural controls, but the ship refused input. Something in the docking interface had damaged the stabilizer. "Disconnect the network," Lyra ordered. "The ship must be isolated." But before her crew could react, Ethan stepped forward again, kneeling near the console. "No time," he said. "It's going to overload." He pulled open a maintenance panel with his bare hands. The heat stung his skin, but he didn't stop. Using a simple multi-tool, he cut one wire and fused another directly. Sparks flashed across his knuckles. Lyra shouted, "You'll burn yourself!" He didn't even look back. "It's fine. Just give me the diagnostic." For several seconds, the bridge filled with red light and alarms. Then, as Ethan twisted a last connector, everything stopped. The noise vanished. The hum returned, steady and calm. He exhaled slowly and leaned against the console. "That should hold." Lyra stared at him in silence. Her people avoided risk, avoided pain, avoided imperfection. But this human had just defied every rule of control she'd ever known, and won. She approached him slowly. "You repaired an Aurivian system without access codes," she said quietly. He shrugged. "Electricity is electricity. Doesn't matter what species made it." There was a spark of humor in his eyes, but also something else. Courage mixed with instinct. She found herself studying his face longer than she meant to. His hands were marked with faint burns, yet he didn't seem to care. The crew applauded softly. Lyra felt a rush of something she had no word for. The sensation made her chest tighten and her pulse accelerate. She quickly turned away, pretending to analyze data. "We will need to investigate how your improvisation worked," she said. Ethan smiled. "I'd be glad to help." Later, when the test ended, Lyra walked through the docking tunnel beside him. She kept her tone calm, but inside her thoughts raced. Her world had always been measured, predictable. Every action had purpose and calculation. Yet today, a single human had used nothing but touch and instinct to save her ship. She looked at him again as they reached the corridor. You act before you think, she said softly. He chuckled. That's what gets us into trouble and out of it to... Who? As he left, Lyra stood in the quiet hall replaying the moment in her mind. She remembered the sparks, his steady hands, and the calm in his eyes when chaos surrounded him. No Arivian she knew could have done that. Logic would have stopped them. Fear of failure would have frozen them. That night, back aboard her ship, Lyra recorded a report for the Dominion Council. She described the incident but left out one detail, the way her thoughts lingered on the human commander longer than they should. She told herself it was curiosity, nothing more. Yet when she looked down at her hands, she imagined what it might feel like to work the way he did. Unshielded, unmeasured, alive. For the first time in her long, disciplined life, Lyra didn't fall asleep to the hum of machines. She stayed awake, watching her fingers, wondering if perfection had made her people numb to the beauty of imperfection. Lyra woke to the sound of soft footsteps echoing in the corridor of her vessel. For a moment she forgot where she was, her thoughts still tangled in the strange images that had followed her through the night. Sparks, heat, human hands working without fear. She rose from her rest chamber and stood before the wide glass wall that showed Earth turning far below, its clouds glowing white over the deep blue ocean. The council had requested a full report, but she delayed it. Each time she tried to describe the human, her words felt incomplete. Logic could not explain why his actions kept replaying in her mind. She had witnessed bravery before, but this felt different. It wasn't just about courage. It was something raw, something alive. The ship's sensors signaled incoming contact. A small shuttle approached, the human delegation returning for further collaboration. Lyra composed herself and walked to the docking platform. When the doors opened, Ethan stepped out first, his uniform slightly wrinkled, a simple datapad in hand. He looked exactly as she remembered, grounded, ordinary, yet impossible to ignore. "Morning, Envoy," he greeted casually. "Good morning, Commander," she replied with practiced calm. "You are early," he smiled. "Couldn't sleep. Your people's technology keeps me curious." The answer made her pause. "Curious," she repeated softly. "We rarely use that word." "That's a shame," he said. "It's the best part of being alive." As they walked through the ship, Ethan stopped to study the walls, fascinated by the shifting colors and smooth textures. "Your ship looks like it's breathing," he said, touching the surface gently. "It is," Lyra replied. "It adjusts its structure based on our emotions." He looked surprised. "So it can feel you?" "In a sense. It reflects our state of mind." He grinned slightly. "Then I guess it never gets bored." Lyra turned away, hiding a faint smile. No one ever spoke to her like that. Her people treated her with reverence and distance. Ethan spoke as if she were just another person, not a representative of 1,000 worlds. The simplicity of it made her feel strangely lighter. They entered the laboratory chamber. Lyra explained the next test, a shared observation of human and Aurivian energy converters. Humans relied on physical fuel and combustion, while the Aurivians used harmonic frequencies that generated energy through resonance. Ethan helped connect the systems manually, insisting on doing it by hand. "Your tools are so small," Lyra said, watching him tighten a bolt with a manual wrench. "Yeah," he said, "but they fit in your pocket. You never know when you'll need to fix something on the go." Her brow furrowed. "We prefer systems that never need repair." He looked up. "But then you'd never learn how to fix them." She fell silent, realizing how foreign that idea was to her. Humans accepted failure as part of creation, but the Aurivians had forgotten what it meant to make mistakes. While they worked, the lab lights dimmed as a pulse of energy passed through the converter. The machine trembled. For a moment, the readings went wild. Lyra's hand moved instinctively toward the control pad, but Ethan's hand reached out first, steadying the main lever. His fingers brushed hers for only a second, but the touch sent a rush of heat through her arm. "It's stable," he said calmly, adjusting the setting. Lyra forced her voice to remain steady. "Yes, it is." She turned away quickly, her mind unsettled. No contact in her culture carried meaning, but that single accidental moment had felt different. Her pulse raced in a way she couldn't explain. When the converter stabilized, Ethan leaned back and laughed softly. "You know," he said, "working with your tech makes me feel like I'm trying to teach a cloud how to hold a hammer." Lyra didn't understand the image, but his laughter warmed the air. "You humans use strange words," she said quietly. "Maybe," he said, "but they make life less empty." She looked at him again. His eyes were bright, unguarded. He didn't hide behind protocol or hierarchy. There was something fearless in the way he existed, unshaped by fear of failure. Later, as they reviewed the data, Ethan leaned closer to see her holographic display. The faint glow from the screen lit both their faces. Lyra noticed the reflection of stars in his eyes. For a brief moment, the distance between their species felt smaller than a breath. When the experiment ended, Ethan gathered his notes. "You're getting better at handling our side of things," he said. Lyra tilted her head. "I am only observing," he smirked. "Sure, observing with a wrench in your hand." She glanced down and realized she was still holding the small human tool. Somehow she hadn't noticed. She felt a flicker of embarrassment. "It was necessary," she said. "Looks good on you," he teased. Lyra didn't answer. Her silence wasn't from offense, but from confusion. She couldn't recall the last time anyone's words made her heart beat faster. When the humans departed, Lyra remained alone in the lab. She placed the wrench on the table and stared at it. It was simple, heavy, cold, yet it held more meaning than any piece of technology she'd known. She turned it slowly in her hands, wondering what it was about these humans that made everything so alive. That night, she stood before the viewport again. Earth shone below, full of light and sound, every city burning with energy. Somewhere down there, millions of imperfect beings laughed, fought, and dreamed. Lyra felt a quiet ache in her chest, realizing she had spent her entire life avoiding the chaos that now fascinated her. She whispered softly to herself. Primitive. Maybe, but not empty. Her ship's walls shifted faintly in color, mirroring her thoughts. For the first time, the perfect symmetry of her world felt too quiet, and deep inside she knew something had begun to change. Something that no law, no code, and no command from the Dominion could stop. Days passed, and the tests between the humans and Aurivians continued. The alliance between the two species was meant to be practical, but for Lyra it had become something else. Every moment she spent beside Ethan made her question everything she once believed about perfection, control, and emotion. One morning, the two worked side by side in the hangar bay. Ethan was repairing a transport drone that had malfunctioned. Lyra stood nearby, her data display open, monitoring the internal readings. He worked without gloves, his sleeves rolled up, his fingers blackened with grease. She watched him with quiet interest. "Your method is messy," she said softly. He smiled without looking up. "Yeah, but it works. I don't understand how you can trust something so unrefined." He lifted his eyes to her. "You don't have to trust the tool. You trust yourself." His words lingered in her mind. For her people, self-trust was almost obsolete. They depended on algorithms and collective decision grids. To trust one's own instinct was seen as reckless. Yet watching Ethan, she saw no recklessness, only confidence built from failure and courage. When he finished, the drone's core came alive, glowing with steady blue light. Lyra stepped closer to study the readings. "It's stable," she said. Ethan grinned. "Told you. A little pressure, a little faith, and it behaves." She frowned slightly. "Faith is an emotional term." "Exactly," he said. "That's why it works." She didn't argue. There was no logic strong enough to explain why her heart quickened every time he smiled like that. Later that day, they moved to the observation deck for a new training session. Lyra had asked to learn more about human flight control. Ethan guided her to a manual simulator. The controls were physical: a seat, levers, pedals, and a screen that showed a virtual horizon. She had never used anything like it. "Sit," Ethan said kindly. "I'll show you." Lyra hesitated but obeyed. The seat felt strange, solid, real. Ethan leaned beside her, explaining the switches. His voice was calm and low, his hand pointing toward the lever. "You control it by touch," he said. "You feel what the ship is doing." She looked doubtful. "We use thought guidance." "This feels outdated," he chuckled. "Outdated, sure. But it teaches you to listen." She placed her hands on the levers, uncertain. He activated the simulation, and the stars began to move on the screen. The ship in the program tilted slightly. She moved the lever too hard and the horizon spun wildly. She gasped. "Easy," he said, steadying her hands. "Don't fight it. Feel it." She took a slow breath and tried again. Gentler this time. The ship leveled out. Her focus sharpened. Her senses felt alive. Every small adjustment gave her a rush of control she had never experienced before. Ethan smiled. "You're getting it. I can't explain this," she said. "It's like the ship is speaking through movement." He nodded. "Exactly. That's flying. It's not numbers and commands. It's instinct." For the next hour they flew through simulated clouds and stars. Lyra's usual calm turned into laughter as she mastered the turns. Ethan watched her, not as a commander studying a foreign ally, but as a human amazed by someone rediscovering joy. When the program ended, Lyra removed the headset slowly. Her face was calm, but her eyes sparkled. "That was unexpected," she said. "Feels good, doesn't it?" he asked. "Yes," she admitted. "It feels alive." They stood in silence for a moment. The hum of the simulator faded, replaced by the distant rhythm of engines. Lyra turned toward the window, gazing at Earth again. "Your world is full of noise," she said quietly, "and yet it has peace hidden inside it." Ethan followed her gaze. "Peace isn't the absence of noise. It's knowing how to stand inside it without losing yourself." She looked at him for a long time. "You sound like a philosopher," he laughed softly. "No, just a human who's made a lot of mistakes." Lyra's lips curved slightly. "Then perhaps mistakes are not as terrible as I thought." "Sometimes," he said, "they're the only way we learn who we are." She stayed quiet after that, absorbing his words. There was a strange comfort in them. She realized she was beginning to understand something she had never learned in her thousands of years of existence: the beauty of imperfection. As the night cycle began, she walked him back to the docking bay. The station lights flickered gently, casting long shadows. Before he boarded the human shuttle, Ethan turned back to her. "You're changing, Lyra," he said softly. Her eyes met his. "I don't know what that means." "It means you're starting to see things the way we do. Not perfect, just real." She didn't respond, but his words followed her long after he left. Back in her quarters, she stood in front of the mirror-like wall. Her reflection looked the same, calm, composed, flawless. But behind her own eyes, she could feel the beginning of something new. Her ship's living surface glowed faintly, mirroring her emotions. For the first time, the light was uneven, imperfect, and strangely beautiful. Lyra touched the wall and whispered to herself, "Ma counsel soon," yet she delayed the transmission again and again. She told herself she needed more data about human behavior. But deep down she knew that wasn't the reason. She simply wasn't ready to leave. When the human shuttle arrived once more for the final stage of testing, Ethan stepped out with the same easy smile. "Morning again, envoy," he greeted. "Commander," she replied softly. "You are punctual as always," he grinned. "Old habit. My father used to say being on time is half the battle." Lyra tilted her head. "And the other half?" He looked thoughtful. "Knowing why you fight at all." His words stayed with her as they entered the command deck. Today's mission was simple: a deep space communication link between human and Aurivian systems. But what began as a test quickly turned into something unexpected. Halfway through the process, the ship's AI began to malfunction. The artificial voice that guided their operations suddenly froze, then repeated the same line over and over. Lyra frowned. "This is not possible." "The system has no errors." Ethan checked the human console. "Maybe it doesn't like our signal." "Impossible," she said, typing faster. But then the lights dimmed and a new command appeared on her holographic display. "Directive override. Human contamination detected." Lyra's chest tightened. The AI had detected human code and classified it as a threat. The ship began sealing off sections automatically. Red lights filled the corridor. Ethan stepped forward, but the door slammed shut between them. "Lyra," he called out. She tried to override the lock, but the system rejected her command. "It's not responding," she said, her voice tense. "The AI believes you are an infection." He smirked faintly, even through the chaos. "Well, that's a first." "Do not joke," she said sharply. "It will eject your section if I do not stop it." Her fingers flew across the controls, trying to override the Dominion's defensive code. The ship's logic core fought back, accusing her of emotional interference. Every time she tried to reason with it, the system responded coldly. Obedience required. Organic irregularities detected. Ethan's voice came through the intercom. "Lyra, listen. You taught me about precision. Let me teach you about trust. Shut down its logic base manually." She hesitated. "That is dangerous." You said humans act before thinking, remember? Maybe now's the time. Her pulse raced. She looked at the glowing control crystal at the center of the deck. The Dominion's rules forbade manual contact with core technology. But this time she didn't care. She reached into the field and gripped the crystal with both hands. A shock of energy surged through her body. For a moment she thought she might lose consciousness, but then everything went still. The lights flickered, then steadied. The voice of the AI fell silent. The ship hummed quietly once more. The doors opened and Ethan ran toward her. She stood there, breathless, her hands still glowing faintly from the energy surge. "You did it," he said softly. "I acted without protocol," she whispered. He smiled. "Welcome to being human." For a second neither spoke. The ship was silent, as if even the walls were listening. Lyra's golden eyes met his, and in that quiet moment, she realized she had crossed a line she could never return from. Later, as the emergency systems cooled down, Lyra received a transmission from the Dominion Council. Their message was cold and formal. They had detected her override and declared her actions a violation of purity protocols. She was ordered to report for decommission review. Ethan watched her face as she read the message. "That doesn't sound good." "They believe I have been corrupted," she said quietly. He frowned. "For saving a ship?" "For breaking their rules," she corrected. "For touching what they said must never be touched." He leaned against the console. "Then maybe those rules need breaking." She looked at him, her expression torn between fear and wonder. "If I disobey, I will be hunted. And if you obey?" She hesitated. "Then I will lose myself." Ethan nodded slowly. "Seems like you already have an answer." The rest of the day passed in heavy silence. Lyra stood at the viewport watching the stars. Her reflection stared back, but she no longer recognized the woman in the glass. She felt something unfamiliar, freedom mixed with fear, excitement mixed with sorrow. When Ethan came to say goodnight, she turned toward him. "Your world is loud, imperfect, and full of contradictions," she said. "And yet, I think I understand why you love it." He smiled gently. "Because it's alive." "Yes," she whispered. "Alive." Ethan stood beside her, his jaw tight. "And they're coming for you." "For us," she corrected softly. "You are considered part of the contamination." He smiled faintly. "Guess I'm in good company then." She turned her eyes toward him. "You don't understand, Ethan. The Arivian patrol fleet is powerful. They will not hesitate." He stepped closer. "Then we leave before they get here." Lyra looked at him, uncertain. "Leave where?" "Anywhere they can't reach us. You said your ship can move through fold space. Let's use it." "That would be considered treason," she said. "Then it's your first lesson in rebellion," he answered, his voice calm but firm. For a moment, Lyra didn't speak. Every instinct in her told her to obey the council, to face the judgment with honor. But another voice whispered deep inside, a voice that had been growing louder with each passing day. It sounded like freedom. She looked at him again and finally nodded. "Very well, but we must act quickly." The two moved through the corridors of the ship. The crew of Arivian aides watched her in confusion as she entered command mode. "Prepare the fold drive," she ordered. One of the aides stepped forward. "Envoy, the council forbids—" "Do it," she interrupted sharply. "That is an order." Her voice, usually calm and measured, carried strength that surprised even her. The aides obeyed. The floor hummed as the ship's living metal began to shift and warm. Ethan looked at her. "You sure about this?" "No," she admitted. "But uncertainty seems to be part of your human philosophy." He grinned. "You're learning fast." As the engines powered up, warning lights flashed red across the deck. The Dominion fleet had already entered the system. Lyra opened the navigation panel. "We have 1 minute before they reach firing range." "Then let's make it count," Ethan said. "Before. We find a place where rules do not decide what is right." He nodded slowly. "You mean freedom?" "Yes," she said. "Freedom." The word felt heavy on her tongue, as if it were something sacred. For days they traveled through uncharted space. The ship adjusted itself to their needs. Lyra began to wear a simpler form of clothing, similar to the human uniform. She started to eat human food, clumsy at first, but smiling at her mistakes. Every time she stumbled, Ethan was patient, explaining, teaching. One evening, as the ship floated quietly near a field of drifting asteroids, They sat together in the observation deck. Lyra watched the human commander fix a small light fixture with nothing but a metal strip and tape. "You humans fix everything with your hands," she said softly. He looked up. "Because hands remember what machines forget." She tilted her head. "And what is that?" He smiled. "How it feels to care." Her eyes lingered on him for a long time. In that moment, she understood what made humanity different. It wasn't strength or intelligence, it was the ability to care even when logic said not to. Their peace didn't last long. The sensors blinked suddenly. Lyra's face turned serious. "They found us." The Arivian patrols had tracked their energy trail. A fleet of silver ships appeared behind them, their lights burning like stars. Ethan stood up. "We can't outrun them?" "Not in open space," she said. "But there is an ion storm nearby. If we hide within it, their sensors will lose us," he grinned. "Sounds dangerous." "It is," she said. "But so is everything worth doing." Ethan took the pilot's seat, hands on the controls. Then let's show she looked out the window at the calm space beyond. The storm had faded, but its wild energy still lingered inside her. For the first time in her long life, she felt something her kind had never understood: the thrill of survival, the beauty of uncertainty, the pulse of life unbound by perfection. As the stars glowed ahead, Lyra whispered softly, "Maybe this is what it means to be human." Ethan smiled. "Maybe it's what it means to be free." The stars stretched endlessly ahead of them, soft and silent after the storm. Lyra sat in the command seat of the ship, her eyes on the horizon of light. It was quiet now, too quiet. The engines hummed like a heartbeat beneath the floor. Ethan stood beside her, scanning the readings. They had escaped, but both knew the Dominion would not stop searching. "How long until they find us again?" he asked. She shook her head slowly. "Maybe days, maybe hours. The Dominion never forgives those who break their order." Ethan smiled faintly. "Then let's give them something worth remembering." Lyra looked at him, unsure if he was joking or serious. But the warmth in his eyes calmed her. The fear that had haunted her since the escape began to fade. They decided to hide near a dying moon. The surface was covered with frozen dust, the air thin but breathable. When they landed, Lyra stepped outside with Ethan for the first time since leaving the station. The ground crunched under their boots and the stars above looked sharper here, untouched by any world's atmosphere. She looked up at the sky. "It feels open," she said softly. "That's freedom," he answered. "It's not always safe, but it's always honest." Lyra turned her gaze toward him. "In the Dominion, honesty is controlled. Every word must serve order." He crouched to pick up a handful of dust, letting it fall through his fingers. "Then maybe it's time someone taught them what real order feels like, the kind that comes from choice." She watched the way his breath fogged in the cold air, the steady rhythm of his movements. He looked fragile compared to the vastness around them, yet somehow stronger than anything she had ever known. Back on the ship, they began building a signal array from the damaged equipment. Lyra worked beside him, her delicate hands clumsy with human tools. She kept dropping the bolts, but Ethan never laughed. He simply picked them up, showing her again with patience and a smile. "You're doing fine," he said gently. "I was not designed for this," she replied. "No one's designed for life," he said. "We just live it." Her eyes softened at his words. There was no judgment in them, no perfection, just truth. That night, as they sat by the glowing console, Lyra opened a private recording. Her voice trembled slightly. "To any Orivian who may find this, I am Lyra, once envoy of the Dominion. I am no longer part of it. I have seen another way. The humans call it freedom. I call it life." She stopped the recording, unsure if she wanted anyone to ever hear it. Suddenly, the ship's sensors beeped. Ethan's head lifted quickly. "Incoming signal." Lyra's hands moved fast. "It's them," she whispered. "The Dominion fleet." Outside, 3 large vessels appeared from fold space, silver and glowing like blades of light. The voice of an Orivian commander echoed through the comms. "Lyra of the Dominion, you are ordered to surrender. Your actions are a stain on our perfection. Return and your sentence will be swift." Ethan looked at her. "What are you going to do?" She took a slow breath. "I am going to answer." She opened the broadcast channel. "This is Lyra," she said, her voice calm but full of quiet strength. "You call me a stain, but I have seen what perfection hides, emptiness. Humanity showed me something better. They taught me to feel, to make mistakes, to live. The commander's voice came back, cold and distant. You speak like a human. You have fallen. Lyra glanced at Ethan and then replied, If falling means understanding life, then yes, I have fallen. And I will never rise back into your emptiness. Without waiting for a reply, she cut the signal. Ethan smiled slightly. That was one hell of a speech, she exhaled. They will fire on us now. Then we make it count, he said. The Dominion ships began to charge their weapons. Lyra's ship shook as the first energy wave hit. Alarms blared. Ethan took the pilot's seat while she rerouted power to the shields. Hold together. Lyra looked at him, relief flooding her chest. You did it. I just followed. He shook his head. No, you chose. The engines flickered, then went quiet. They were safe, at least for now. Hours later, they sat near the viewport, watching the first rays of a nearby sun rise over the ruined moon. The light painted their faces in gold. Lyra whispered, Do you think they'll ever understand us? Ethan smiled gently. Maybe not. But that's okay. Some things don't need understanding, just feeling. She looked at him, her voice soft. Then perhaps I have finally learned what it means to feel. He nodded. And you taught me what it means to believe. They sat in silence, watching the sunrise spill across the horizon. Lyra rested her hand against the glass, feeling the warmth through it. Her reflection looked different now, no longer flawless, no longer cold. It looked alive. For the first time, she didn't care what the Dominion thought of her. She didn't care about perfection or control. She cared about the beating heart of life, unpredictable, wild, and human. As the light grew stronger, she whispered softly to herself, Perfection is silence. Life is noise. I choose noise. Ethan smiled beside her, his eyes on the stars. Welcome to humanity, Lyra. And together they watched the dawn rise. Not as commander and envoy, not as human and alien, but as two beings who had finally learned what it meant to live.